take two, camera.
I was sitting there quietly minding my own business and developing some other stuff, and Walter Parkes called me up and said, have you got 20 minutes? And threw a reproduction of this rather beautiful 19th century painting onto my desk. And I stared at it, and I went, oh God, because I knew I was essentially, you want to bleep this? I was fucked.
Once we got to a point where everyone knew what we were doing, they thought we were mad. When I was a kid, I did a year of graduate school, got sick of the university, as we all do. Bummed around Europe, East Bloc, West Bloc, saw a lot of coliseums. When I got to Baghdad, I swapped a book on the Irish Revolution for a book by a guy named Daniel P. Mannix called Those About to Die, which is a very tawdry sort of overview of the Coliseum and the games. But the thing that was great about Mannix's book was that it identified the ancient games with sort of modern entertainment games. And I never forgot about it. I always thought, gee, it'd make a great movie someday. And by the time I got to India, I think I decided I wanted to be a screenwriter. So, you know, years later, when I was writing Amistad in Rome, I began researching Gladiator and working on the script.
I had worked with David Franzoni on one other project, and he came to me with some research about the Roman arena. And as you looked at the research, as I looked at the research, you realize it was completely the epicenter of the whole society. And in the way that in that period of time, all roads led to Rome, all roads in Rome led to the arena. And it was the center of technology. They were literally eradicating species of animals on the world because they were taking so many to destroy in their arena in more and more theatrical ways. But as we read the research, it felt very contemporary. There are a lot of ideas of a whole population distracted by entertainment while they were missing the more serious issues that felt very much like now.
I think behavior of people is odd because it doesn't really change, does it? I think the weapons change, the clothing changes, but fundamentally people's behavior doesn't change. Politics are all essentially the same. I would even say you get as equally the same amount of backstabbing today as you did then. Now it's a bit more metaphorical.
If we went to a Roman amphitheatre to watch the games, it would seem enormously familiar in some ways. You know, the way you get your ticket and you're shown to your proper seat, and the vendors come around and you buy refreshments, and it might seem perfectly ordinary. And then you realize that the spectacle is different.
Just like in a modern either soccer or American football stadium where they love to see people hit and get hurt and, you know, the ranting of 50, 60, 70,000 people.
And we have the word WWF, and we have all of the different sort of wrestling things, and we have, you know, professional boxing is still the biggest thing on TV when there's a heavyweight fight.
It's a question that we've all been asking and debating about is, you know, what is the desire for blood sport and people, you know, what is that? Is it an escape?
I think what pulls us to Gladiators is the adrenaline. There is a real excitement. Sport is exciting. Blood sport is that much more exciting. And I think there's a sort of morbid fascination the present has with the Roman past, because we ask all the time, could we be like these guys? Could we sit around 50,000 people in a great building watching someone die, cheering? Could we be like it? Or are they completely different from us? Are they monsters? Did they work differently as human beings? And I think we know that there's a bit in us that is absolutely there with the Romans. We could be like them.
When you think about the amphitheatre, whether you're watching two people fighting or a person and an animal, there's an element of unpredictability there, which is balanced out by the comparative skill of the two participants. And that kind of sort of gambling on the odds, I think, was a great attraction in those days and must also still be an attraction now. Although I think the major attraction today of looking at the Roman amphitheatre is through the telescope of time, looking at this sort of frozen cultural phenomenon, which seems so alien and yet in some ways fulfills many of the instincts that we have been taught not to indulge.
What was most important about it, and I think was least interesting to me, were the way they'd done Roman epics in the past was trying to capture, I think they were trying to capture what it must have been like to be an ancient Roman or an ancient Greek. And I don't think that's possible, first of all. And secondly, I don't find it very interesting.
We know that sword and sandal movies had been failing for about 40 years when we started work on Gladiator. And I think my best analysis was that they just felt locked in the past.
What I was trying to find a way in with Colosseum for us on Gladiator was, how is this about us? You know, how is this about the United States? And when I first talked to Steven Spielberg about it, I told Steven, I said, you know, in a way, this really isn't about ancient Rome at all. This is about Los Angeles 1,000 years from now. Coliseum is Dodger Stadium. I modeled Proximo very consciously after a CIA agent. I mean, I used to say Mike Ovitz, but it could have been any CIA agent. And we have, you know, I guess a modern morality play. So I had it all kind of worked out, and I went in to see Steven, and Steven had heard that I was going to come in and pitch a Gladiator piece. So the meeting was basically, it was Steven and Walter Parks, and Steven goes, so David, I understand you want to do a movie about a gladiator. And I go, yeah, in ancient Rome, yeah. In the Colosseum in ancient Rome, yes. Okay. And that was it. So I remember Walter called me that afternoon and goes, you know, David, do you have a story worked out? And I said, you know, I've got it all worked out, Walter, so don't fear. But Steven knew it was time.
It was just one of those pitches that, on a conceptual level, made sense immediately. I mean, a lot of people have talked about, gee, you know, why did you all get behind a movie the likes of which had been made for such a long time? But I don't know why. The timing for this movie just seemed right when we heard it the first time. And as I said, the emotional contour, again, in the very most rudimentary form, the emotional contours were there of this basic hero's journey.
After we had solved the script, and we had a real character journey set in the Roman arena, the question of filmmaker was really daunting.
We were looking for someone with vision, of course, you know, and there were sort of, you know, two balls to keep up in the air on this. One was we were doing a serious, dramatic piece, and performances were crucial. The other was we were making this fantastic spectacle. We were doing sort of a theme park, if you will. And so we needed a director who had those capabilities.
You know, we talked about the short list of people that can do that kind of work. And on the short list, of course, is Ridley Scott. There's maybe no one who's ever been better at creating a coherent other world. You know, you think of what he did in Blade Runner.
There's a tiny, tiny handful of directors who can create worlds, who can deal with enormous technical problems, and here's the important point, but not be overwhelmed by them, not literally forsake the really important issues of narrative and story and theme because the pursuit of the size is crushing. When you really look at that list, you go right to Ridley.
Unlike many people, Ridley's an artist. He often jokes about spending his twilight years in some garden painting. And so Walter Parks and I went to see Ridley, and we brought the script, and we also brought a painting, a famous painting of the arena.
The artist was Jean-Léon Gérôme, and it was entitled Thumbs Down. And it shows a corner of the Colosseum, the wall, and one seems to be looking back up at what probably is one of the more corrupt of the emperors. Looks like Nero, I think, who's actually leaning over in a kind of rather debauched state with his thumb down, indicating that the Antibatai, who is the armored gladiator, who's standing over the vanquished who is still alive, and he's looking up at the emperor saying, should I kill him or not? And the guy's doing that, which means death.